Okay, phone lines are already jammed. Lynn Marzulli, our guest, will be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, very good. To the phones we go. Wildcard line, Bruce in San Jose, California. Hey, Bruce, thanks for calling.
Hey, George.
Yeah.
First, I wanted to say that Lynn's new book is outstanding. I've read it, and it has a big finale at the end.
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate that.
The big finale.
Welcome back to the big finale. For those of you keeping score at home, this is episode 9. Tonight we have a special guest, Paul Davids. He's the author of An Atheist in Heaven. Very controversial subject. I don't necessarily agree with his findings, and we will actually talk about that during the roundtable next week. But for now, we're going to listen to Paul Davids regarding his book and the events that caused him to write his book, An Atheist in Heaven. If nothing else, it's fascinating.
How much of a geek are you? No, seriously, do you think you're a Star Wars expert? Well, take the hardest Star Wars quiz in the world and find out. Go to zippycheese.com and see how well you know the Star Wars movies. There's a quiz for the original trilogy, or, if you dare, take the quiz for the prequel trilogy. What's the name of the creature in the trash compactor in Episode 4? What was the name of the curator of the Jedi Archives in Episode 2? Go to zippycheese.com, take the quiz, and share with your friends. There's also a Marvel comic book quiz. Do you know obscure Marvel comic book characters? We'll find out today. That's zippycheese.com.
And joining me this week, I'm honored to welcome Paul Davids. Paul Davids is a Princeton psychology graduate, an original fellow of the AFI Center for Advanced Film Studies, an award-winning Hollywood director, writer, and producer of many TV films distributed by Showtime and NBC Universal, including The Sci-Fi Boys, Saturn Award winner, Best DVD 2006, Jesus in India, and Roswell, the Golden Globe nominee, Best Motion Picture for TV. His latest film, Marilyn Monroe Declassified, will be released soon. Paul Davids was production coordinator for Marvel Productions' Transformers and a co-author with his wife, Hollis Davids, of 6 books in the Lucasfilm Star Wars saga, beginning with The Glove of Darth Vader and ending with Prophets of the Dark Side. Paul Davids' new book, and this is a page-turner, I really enjoy this book. His new book is co-authored with Gary Schwartz, and it's called An Atheist in Heaven, The Ultimate Evidence for Life After Death, with a question mark. Again, it's An Atheist in Heaven, The Ultimate Evidence for Life After Death. Paul Davids, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm glad you picked up my book, and I'm glad you found it to be a page-turner.
Yeah, it's great. And I should mention, people can go on Amazon tonight and either get a hard copy or get an ebook, like for their Kindle reader. But I really enjoyed this book, An Atheist in Heaven. Now, this book centers around experiences you have had with Forrest J. Ackerman. And J without a period, by the way. Now, for those who may not know, who was Forrest J. Ackerman when he was physically on this planet?
Well, Forrest J. Ackerman was one of the original promoters of science fiction in America and around the world to bring it into the mainstream, because originally science fiction was considered a sort of a fringe interest. He coined the term sci-fi, And he grew up in the days of the silent movies. Fari, as we called him, was born in 1916, and he died in 2008 when he was 92. Most people knew him as the editor-in-chief of Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. It was a really popular magazine. Generations of kids that loved horror, science fiction, or just loved the movies and wanted to go into directing or working in the films in any capacity. They all gravitated toward Fari, who was sort of their Pied Piper. The other thing to know about Fari, well, two things. One, he lived in a great 18-room mansion in the Los Feliz area of Los Angeles, near Griffith Park. And he filled every room of that house with memorabilia and collectibles from science fiction and horror films. Ray Bradbury, the famous author who was his great friend and was one of his first clients, as a matter of fact, he called Fari's house the Fort Knox of science fiction. So anything related to the early science fiction movies, the original models, the articulated dinosaurs from King Kong, spaceships, props from vampires, and anything from Lon Chaney and Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff. You found it all in his house. The other important thing to know, in addition to his tremendous influence on young filmmakers, including myself, was he was an atheist. He didn't subscribe to any religion, and that was true from the time he was young. His parents tried. They took him to maybe 10 different denominations of Christianity and even a synagogue, and nothing worked. So he rejected, he was sort of a card-carrying atheist. He would go public with the fact he didn't believe in God, didn't believe in an afterlife, didn't believe in prayer or angels, and he didn't believe that there was any reality to any of these fictions that he promoted, whether it was ghosts or vampires or the undead. You know, to him, it was all good fun, literary fiction, great scary movies, but nothing more. So as he grew old and approached his last years, I was one of several who sort of confronted him and said, Fari, what if you're wrong? You know, you take this hard and fast position, there's no God, and there's no afterlife, but what if you're wrong? So he said in a sort of humorous way, I mean, he had a great sense of humor. He said, look, he said, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in an afterlife, but if I'm wrong, and if I wake up to some great science fiction convention in the sky, you know, I'll give your regards to Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. He said, and maybe when the party dies down a little bit and I have some time, some free time, maybe I'll drop you a line. And then he would sort of get a stern voice and turn very serious and say, but don't count on it. So
my experience has been that many atheists, at least, do not believe in an afterlife. And also contrast that with many religious people do not believe in an afterlife apart from a God, a superior being. Given that, how has your book been received?
Well, you know, the book just came out a few weeks ago, so it's a little early to say how it's been received or going to be received by different types of groups of people. I have heard from people like you who say it's a page-turner. It reads like a mystery, that it's very, very engrossing. Yeah. I've sent it to Michael Shermer, the executive director of the Skeptics Society and publisher of Skeptic Magazine. He was in my film about this subject that predated the book, because I did make a documentary film first called The Life After Death Project. That's at Amazon too, by the way, but it was on Sci-Fi Channel. So I haven't heard from Michael Shermer yet, but he had been as skeptical and entrenched in his beliefs for many, many years, as Fari was in his. But it's interesting that Michael Shermer did have an experience that shook his skepticism to the very core. That's what he called the article he wrote about that in Scientific American. So something happened to him, sort of like what happened to me, except it happened to me after Fari died many, 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 many times. I don't need any more confirmation. I've had it in a physical sense. I've had it from instrumental transcommunication, all kinds of after-death communication, incredible synchronicities, mediums bringing him through with information they couldn't possibly know. In other words, once this started for me, I just found myself the recipient of him dropping me a line. Now, as far as the believers in God and religion or Orthodox Christianity, I don't have anything to say about God or deity or even a conventional view of heaven in this book. It's called An Atheist in Heaven, but heaven in the broadest possible sense, meaning that the idea that there is something larger, another realm, perhaps in some ways elevated to this one, that we have a spirit that outlives the body and goes there. Now, why it goes there or how, whether it's a purely spiritual mechanism, whether it's a gift of God, whether it's a quality of quantum mechanics and physics, who knows? I have no idea. And I can't say, and I don't have anything to say that would subtract from anyone's religious beliefs in any respect. All I can say is I've seen evidence firsthand. Firsthand. It's not all over once the body becomes inert clay under the ground. Something of us continues, the personality, in Fari's case, even a sense of humor, and that, if you will, want to call it a spirit, it has the ability to continue to interact with us. Now, Christians, of course, believe in guardian angels. You know, a guardian angel over your shoulder might prevent you from getting into a car wreck by having you, swerve the steering wheel in a certain direction at just the right moment to save your life. Christians believe in that sort of thing. So they do believe in a spiritual interaction with us that can have a very good effect. In this case, many of whom were involved in the scientific studies of my evidence pleaded with me to write a book. And Gary Schwartz joined me because he'd worked on so much of the research. They said, with a book, we can take it seriously. We can study it. It would be annotated. Maybe you've got an index. We can look at all the phenomena you're talking about and compare them. It's much more pleasing to an academic mind than a documentary film. So that's what I did, because I wanted people to know that, certainly as far as I'm concerned, my life experience, this is true. Mm-hmm. And I think people want to know that it doesn't end with death.
Yeah. And again, we're speaking about the book An Atheist in Heaven, The Ultimate Evidence for Life After Death by Paul Davids. Fascinating book. What was your first experience with Forrest or Fori communicating with you after his death?
Well, first, the timing was important. There was a great tribute for Fari Ackerman. He was very loved by a large science fiction community around the world. So the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood filled every seat with a tribute for him a few months after he passed away. And the tribute was in March of 2009. He died the previous December. So people came into town. Filmmakers from Canada had a documentary about his life to show. There were speakers such as Ray Bradbury and even Peter Jackson checked in from New Zealand, and John Landis and Guillermo del Toro. And I was invited to be a speaker because I'm known in the science fiction world. I produced the Showtime film Roswell, a very popular film about flying saucers. And I was one of the original people on the Transformers show, which is beloved in the science fiction world. And I also, as you mentioned in the beginning, I wrote with my wife 6 of the Star Wars sequel books for George Lucas. So it was appropriate that I be there as a speaker. Also, that Fari had been kind of like a guiding uncle to me since I was a teenager, and then I decided to go into the field of media. So there was this emotional closeness and this concentration on Fari by so many people that weekend. Now, the first thing that happened was the two Canadian filmmakers that made a film about him. They went to his crypt before the tribute. And Mike McDonald, in a humorous mood, rapped on the crypt, knock, knock, knock. Fari, hi, it's us. We come down from Canada. We got the movie. We're here for you. We miss you. And they didn't feel that was a disrespectful thing to do because it was Fari. It was the kind of thing, he would have smiled. They're rapping on my crypt. But these guys told a story that they heard from Fari within an hour of doing that. Through their computers, really, really weird, bizarre stuff happened. Ackerman, his name comes up on their screen. They hear a voice commenting on their musing about whether he's really dead. To them, it was a paranormal, unearthly moment. Now, at this point, I'm sort of a non-believer. I have a fascination for this stuff. I did know Dorothy Allison, a psychic detective. I done a sequence on her for the lie detector show of F. Lee Bailey, and I did believe she had that kind of ability to communicate with an afterlife, so I didn't reject it completely, and I certainly believed these guys. I mean, I didn't have any reason to doubt what they were saying, but I didn't expect it was going to involve me. A week later, it did. And that brings us, to the direct answer to your question. What happened first? Well, it was an ink blot. It was an ink obliteration on a document that shouldn't have been there. I printed out a document, 24 pages, so I left the house while it was printing because it took a long time. When I came back, looked it over, document was fine, nothing unusual. I was going to study it. Had to do with business meetings, phone calls of the last year, tax time. So far we have no story. I tossed it on the bed. I was alone in our Santa Fe vacation house. My wife was not with me. No one else was there. The doors were locked. I go into the bathroom. I'm there, 5 minutes later, I come out, I look at the document, and it's been changed. And this was the shock of my life, Bruce. This was, if there's a defining moment, a crossing of the Rubicon. In Christianity, some people say, I got Jesus then at that moment. Well, at that moment, looking at that document that now had 4 words blacked out neatly. I mean, this wasn't like an ink pen in the bed dripped. It wasn't water dripping from a ceiling. There was no reason for this, no earthly reason, no logical explanation why 4 words targeted. Someone chose those words neatly, right within the lines. And 2 of the words you could still faintly read, the other 2 words completely blacked out. So it was done deliberately. There was no one in the house but me. There was no one physically there who could have done it. So at that moment, Paul Davids, who's talking to you now, becomes a believer in these kind of things. I've seen it firsthand. You can call it a ghost or a spirit, or I didn't know, maybe it was a demon. Maybe it was an angel. I didn't know why it was there or what this message meant, but clearly it was some kind of message. It had purpose to it. So at that moment, it got my attention. It shocked me. And I had to get the answer. I just had to figure out why those 4 words, what does it mean, and can any scientist study this thing and tell me how and why it happened? Can any scientist give me an answer that's going to quiet my mind of all of these, paranormal beliefs that were flooding my mind at that point?
Yeah.
And that began my trail to multiple universities, chemistry departments. It all started then in 2009. Hasn't stopped now. We're years later.
Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about some of the findings on that. But before we do that, can you talk about your conversation with Joe Moe that helped you determine that this ink blot obliteration was real?
Right, and that it related to Fari Ackerman.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea. The words that were crossed out didn't seem to relate to anything of importance to me at first. But I've got to emphasize, I said Fari had a sense of humor. It was a particular kind of weird sense of humor. that involved wordplay and puns. He was a master punner. And someone did a sculpture of him with his hands in the stockade, the pillory, and they said that he was in the pillory for punishment. So he was always making puns and finding words within words and names within names. So this blackout of these 4 words, it turns out, I figure out later, was a code. It was just what Fari would have done under those circumstances. So Joe Mo, let's get to him. The words that were crossed out were spoke to Joe Amadei. Now, Joe Amadei is somebody else. He's a producer in New York, a distributor mainly of movies, DVDs in New York. I had talked to him once. This was an entry like a diary saying, on that day I spoke to Joe Amadei. Few spaces earlier, it said, left message for Joe Amadei. But that isn't what the spirit, if you will, decided to black out. It was spoke to. So why Joe Amadei? It didn't make any sense to me. I'd had one conversation with the man in my entire life. But when I suspected or questioned, could Fari have been responsible? Because after all, those guys at the Tribute who went to his crypt, they had this contact from him. So I asked myself, and I wanted to know how he blacked out words when he edited a document. So I looked up old articles from Famous Monsters. There was a magazine that showed the original articles with things blacked out. Mm-hmm. But what I saw there was sort of a press release for Famous Monsters, and I thought to myself, maybe that was done by his publisher. Even though it looked like what I had, maybe it was the publisher. I wanted to know. How would I know? Well, Fari's closest companion for the last 10 years of his life is a wonderful, generous, and loving Hawaiian man named Joe Mo. Mm-hmm. His father was a famous Hawaiian singer, and he was a great fan of science fiction. He lived with Fari those last 10 years or so and took care of Fari's every need. And so I thought, well, if I call Joe, I'll find out whether this article I'm looking at was edited by Fari or not. So when I called Joe, this is about 10 days after the Tribute, I called him. He didn't even let me talk first. He said, Paul, I got to talk to you. He said, listen to me. You know, I'm a skeptic like Fari was. You know, I don't believe in, spirits or life after death or any of that stuff. And I'm an agnostic. Mm-hmm. Maybe not an atheist, but certainly an agnostic. And he said, what happened to me after the Tribute, you can call it an apparition. I don't know what to call it, but it may have been some sort of lucid dream. It was like it happened just 1 minute before I woke up, but I was seeing my room just the way it was, and Fari walked in. And Fari, he had been dead for a couple of months. And he said he had a grin on his face. He said, "Pal, seen any good Hollywood tributes lately?" You see, and Joe was the one he'd been one of the main organizers of the Tribute. He said, Fari, you were there, you like it. Fari told him it was the 9th wonder of the world. Well, why the 9th wonder? Well, because Fari's into science fiction and King Kong, and everybody in that realm knows that King Kong is the 8th wonder of the world. So he's not going to insult King Kong by saying that his Tribute was the 8th wonder. King Kong's the 8th wonder. So he said the Tribute was the 9th wonder of the world. And Joe said, and then it's like suddenly woke up, but everything was the same. Everything I was seeing the same. The room, everything looked exactly as it did, except no more Fari there. Fari's gone. He said, Paul, it was as if Fari came and spoke to me. So that, Bruce, that was the moment of revelation where I understood this ink obliteration in a whole new way, because it said, spoke to Joe Amadei. So Joe Mo's name is in the middle of Amadei. And in my book, An Atheist in Heaven, I cite 12 or 15 different places in Fari's magazine when he used a name within a name to make a point. So it was perfectly logical that he would find Mo in the middle of Amadei and say, I spoke to Joe, I thanked him. And I was a speaker at the tribute. So in a way, his telling me he stopped by, spoke to Joe, wanted you to know. It was sort of like a spirit's way of thanking me, too. I don't know. But it was like confirmation. Yeah. Joe wasn't dreaming. He saw Fari. This is real. And again, he would have expected me to figure that out because of the name Mo in Amadei, that it was, it's exactly what he would do. So now that doesn't prove it, Bruce. To me, it's very convincing to me, but I needed scientists, and I spent the next 3 or 4 years with scientists at many universities, chemists mainly, but also psychologists. In the case of Gary Schwartz, he had studied mediums for 15 years at University of Arizona, Tucson. But I started at the top of the chemistry department of Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis. Dr. Jay Siegel took this on as a project to look at the ink. He's a world-class expert in inks, paints, dyes, solvents. So I get involved, I hand-deliver it to his laboratory. I film there. Something weird happens while we're there. He calls in his former associate. They had been at Michigan State together, chemistry professor named Dr. John Allison, now at College of New Jersey. And I flew to New Jersey with the document. They made little pinpricks in it. They subjected this to machines. There was I think mass spectrometry. There was laser desorption. They wanted to and did, figure out what all the molecules were in this ink and how could it have happened, because they agreed from the beginning it was deliberate. Deliberate. And I'm no liar. I'm not making anything up. This was real, that I was alone when this happened. So it's impossible. Right off the bat, as far as the skeptics are concerned, impossible. You're dealing with something that, physics and our world, we can't understand this. And I will say that these scientists who worked on it for 3 years came away with the same bewilderment, confusion, awe, and a little trepidation mixed with a little bit of fear. Because not only couldn't they answer the key questions, and they could not reproduce the ink obliteration with all of their expertise, but in the case of John Allison, he was visited by Fari repeatedly. The stuff that happened to him was as bizarre as what happened to me, and some of it we even caught on film. So, as I say, Bruce, regardless of what you believe or your religion, who's ever listening, or what you've been taught or what you think, this is good news. This is good news. Fari's still around. His body's no longer here. His same sense of humor, his prankishness. He finds ways to say hello. And like he promised, he dropped me a line. Well, that was a line of text. He was an editor. Makes sense. He's letting me know there is life after death. Mm-hmm. So take it as you will. I'm the guy here to declare there is life after death. We do survive. Our personality survives. We can still make contact with our loved ones. And I guess religions have been telling us this for thousands of years anyway. Why is it a shock? Why is it new? Well, because there's evidence, and science has been able to study it.
And I should say that Dr. John Ellison actually contributed to your book, An Atheist in Heaven. This is fascinating information. Now, what is the story on Forrest J. Ackerman's ring and the mysterious trip it took?
Okay. Oh, but before that, let me just mention with John Ellison. Yes, he wrote a chapter in the book detailing all of his chemical research. He stayed on the project for 3 years. So the academics who saw my movie, The Life After Death Project, that's what they wanted. Show us the full scientific report. Give us all the data. And that's what I did, with John Ellison contributing actually 2 chapters. Mm-hmm. Now, you asked about the strange ring. This is one of many, we call them synchronicities, I think is the term. It's where there's a coincidence that is so unlikely and improbable that has a really strong emotional meaning to the person that beholds it. Fari was gifted at one point a ring that Bela Lugosi, who played Dracula in the original 1933 Universal Classic, this was a ring that Bela Lugosi had worn when he played Dracula in one of the sequel movies. So he always wore it. He took great pride in it. And after Fari passed away, there was an estate auction, and that ring sold for, I think, $30,000. Could have been $40,000. And then nobody knew what happened to the ring. So a year goes by. Now, I mentioned the documentary filmmakers up in Canada. They were from. Mike McDonald was from Halifax, and his writing partner, Ian Johnston, was from, he lived in Toronto. So up in Halifax, that's like 4,000 miles away from Los Angeles. That's where Mike McDonald lives, and it happens that there's a gallery that's within 100 feet of his house. You know, you walk out the door, and, you know, practically just a couple of doors down, you're at this gallery that has a window display. So one day he's walking past the window display, and there in the front window is Forrest J. Ackerman's Dracula ring on display. Okay? Right next to his house. So, you know, it's like, what are the chances? What are the odds? I mean, they're just off the charts that would be there. They even had it, they had a molding of Boris Karloff, who played Frankenstein, a molding of his hand, and this ring was on a finger of Boris Karloff's hand. And it was just on display for a day or two, and then it was gone. So he just happened to be walking by and see it. Yeah. So we call that a synchronicity because it's a coincidence where you can say, you can't even name the statistics of the odds. Is it 10 million to 1? Is it 1 billion to 1? Who knows? It's so unlikely.
Yeah. But
that at the moment the beholder sees it, you know, when Mike McDonald sees it, you know, he gasps. He has an emotional, you know, charge from that, a kind of a shock by seeing it, because he remembers he rapped on this man's crypt, and this man sort of repays him the visit by what? After he's gone, sending his ring 4,000 miles next door to Mike McDonald's house? You know, or is it a total accident, as the skeptics like to say, and then dismiss it? The problem is, in my book that I wrote with Gary Schwartz, An Atheist in Heaven, we've got a glossary of 140 incidents, 140 things in all different categories of afterlife research that happened since Fari died. Synchronicities are one of the categories, and we've got dozens of them, all of them as powerful as this thing with the ring. So, you want evidence? You an agnostic? Are you a doubter? You know, take a look, read An Atheist in Heaven, and while you're at it, I gotta say, if you watch The Life After Death Project, I made 2 movies out of that. One was on Sci-Fi, and then there was a sequel. You can get the 2 DVDs together. The point is, I put it all together so that inquiring minds and skeptical minds can read all this and know I've sworn to my story, and scientists are telling the rest of the story. And it's all true.
Yeah. And you make a good point as far as the book itself. We obviously in an interview can't cover everything, and that's why you should get a copy of the book where you can see the whole story. It's called An Atheist in Heaven, The Ultimate Evidence for Life and After Death by Paul Davids. Again, An Atheist in Heaven by Paul Davids. Now,
Gary Schwartz.
And Gary Schwartz, that's right. Now, I don't remember this part of the book, but obviously it must be in there because I wrote it down. Is Forrest J. Ackerman's house haunted?
Yes. I think that's a fair statement. The house after the big house, the Acker Mansion, after he departed, it was remodeled. It's owned now by a man named Mark Rawlings, who I've gotten to know. And after that house, Fari moved to a small bungalow. He was, you know, too old to deal with all of those stairs and everything. It was too big for him. And he sold off a lot of his collection at that point. But the house, it may have been haunted before Fari ever even moved in, because actor John Hall, who was Raymar of the Jungle, had lived there. And it's known that the day that John Hall died, his picture on the wall, he fell off the wall. Okay, there's another one of your coincidences, your synchronicities. Mm-hmm. But when Fari passed away, there were tenants in that house. I went to visit them, and they are in Life After Death Project. They're telling their stories. They say, yes, the house, they've seen sort of shadow people walking across the wall. They felt presences. There's a singer who lived there who would rehearse with her music on a music stand, and she'd go out of the room to make a phone call at night when she was rehearsing, or get a glass of water or whatever, come back and find her music papers scattered all over the floor, and there's no windows, there's no vents, there's no fans, there's no wind. Now, the same exact thing happened to chemist John Allison. The very first weekend I took him the document. He didn't even want to tell me this at first. He kept it a secret till the end of our first day of study together, that in the morning he'd had papers that he put on a chair in his dining room, tucked under his briefcase a little bit. He went upstairs to the bathroom, came downstairs, alone in the house. Again, no open windows, no fans, no vents. And those papers are scattered across the dining room floor. They didn't just fall off the chair. They're scattered. So there are phenomena like this that seem to be connected to specific spirits. In Fari's case, again, he was an editor. The scattering of pages is one of the things that you see. Weird effects with clocks is another thing that you see. John Allison, when I was filming him in his home explaining what his scientific procedure was going to be, the clock over his shoulder in the background was an old clock, and it was ticking away, and it suddenly chimed. And it was caught on film, and he was shocked because he said, look, I haven't wound up that clock in years. It shouldn't be working. And it did never work again, but it just happened to chime for us while he's telling me about how he's going to study the ink blot. And then ink, of course, is another thing that specifically relates to Fari. You will find many instances, and they're all in the glossary and they're scattered through the chapters of the book, of things having to do with ink that happened after Fari died. The editor using ink. And I just recently got to see, I hadn't even seen this before, or if I did, I completely forgot it. Fari wrote a statement November before he died, a few weeks before he died. This is his final statement, and it was later published in the magazine, Famous Monsters. And he said, by the time you read this, Prince Sirki will have come and taken me away. Well, Prince Sirki, that's his way of saying, I'm visited by death. Death comes and takes me away. He knew he was going to die. So and in that page, he talks about the fact he's an atheist, doesn't believe in afterlife. If he's wrong, he'll give your regards to all these different actors. And the very first word at the top of the page were the ink. Very first things he wrote in the statement were the words the ink. The ink that you're reading right now, it's like glue to your fingers. You're not going to leave this page till you get to the end. So he's always talking about the ink. And in Afterlife, he uses ink to communicate his presence.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I know one of the ink incidences had to do with Fate magazine. Now tell me about Sean Fernald. How did you meet him, and what has been his experiences with Fari?
Sean Fernald grew up in Hawaii as a close friend of Jomo. They were buddies. They both loved Fari's magazine together. And when they got to Hollywood, they called up Fari. They got to meet him. Joe actually ended up living with Fari and working for him as his assistant for many years. Sean became a music supervisor in the music business, dealing with the licensing of music for different films. And then eventually was a producer, did some producing. So Sean had attended many of Fari's annual birthday parties, as had I, but we had never really gotten to know each other, apart from a simple introduction. Until later, after Fari's death, I sought out his help in the editing of the Life After Death project. And he came up to the mountain cabin where I was doing a lot of this work in Big Bear Lake, California. And from the night he arrived, he stayed for about a week or 10 days, but from the night he arrived, weird stuff started happening to Sean and with Sean. Just stuff you say, that can't happen. That can't happen. I'll give you a couple examples. Sean had never met Mike McDonald. That's the director of the documentary who had the incident with the ring in Halifax. Never met him. But while we're side by side there, Sean suddenly gets a message from Facebook saying that he has a message from Michael McDonald. He's never met him. And I thought that was so strange. I said, well, track it down. And I got in touch with Michael McDonald. Did you just contact Sean Fernald? Because we don't see a message here. What were you trying to say to him? He said, no, I didn't contact Sean Fernald. Who's Sean Fernald? You see? Okay, so it starts out, okay, that can't happen. Then the next thing that happens is that my wife comes up to the cabin for the weekend, and she picks up a bottle of wine. We've got a lot of different bottles of wine scattered around the house that we've been gifted through the years. And, you know, we're not big drinkers, so the wine accumulates. Mm-hmm. She picks it up at random. She comes up, and when Sean sees the bottle of wine she brought up, he goes into sort of shock. And by the way, he's a skeptic too. He has a hard time, you know. But here's what happened. When he got married in 2004, there were only a few people at his wedding, and Fari Ackerman was one of them. And Jomo was there. And he knows what kind of wine he served at that wedding. He has pictures of it. It was San Alejandro de las Rojas. It was a Spanish wine, and it's kind of a rare wine. And that was the bottle of wine that my wife happened to bring up. You know, the same bottle of wine that had been at Sean's 2004 wedding, and the date on the bottle of wine she brought up was 2004. Okay? She had no idea about the marriage, or when Sean was married, or what kind of wine he served there. Another gross synchronicity. So Sean, after a few more of these things happened too, and Sean says, Fari, if you're out there, if this is real, if you can hear me, you know, I really appreciate you giving me a sign. He says, you know, he said, how about, I haven't been bitten by a spider in 10 years. You like creepy, crawly things, so bite me with a spider. Okay? So the next morning, Sean comes downstairs, looks in the sink, and there's a daddy longlegs there. And it just stays there hour after hour. I mean, he leaves it alone, he goes, he checks later. Hours later, it's still there. Yeah, people can argue about whether daddy longlegs is technically a spider or not. There is one type of species, you know, that definitely is spider family. But no spider bite that day. But he goes home to Los Angeles the next day, and he wakes up with not one spider bite, but 2 spider bites.
Wow. And
then, this was just before I was to leave for Tucson to visit Dr.
Gary
Schwartz, yeah, who became eventually my co-author. And I got 2 spider bites on my hip. Big welts, you know. I even took a picture of it, but I'm not going to show it to anybody because of where it was. But yes, I get 2 spider bites, and I come down to talk to Gary, and he doesn't know about any of this yet, but he is suffering from 2 spider bites. So there you go. I mean, what do you make of this? What do you make of it, Bruce?
Oh, it's very compelling. And, of course, this week we're speaking to Paul Davids, and we're talking about his new book co-authored with Gary Schwartz. An Atheist in Heaven, the ultimate evidence for life after death. And there's many great stories. For the sake of time, we can't go over all of them, of course. That's why you need to pick up a copy of An Atheist in Heaven. One of the stories...
Amazon.com is where to get it.
Yes.
There aren't that many bookstores left yet, so
that's true.
Authors don't chase after Barnes & Noble the way they used to, It's easy to get it at Amazon, and you can get either the ebook, the Kindle, or the hardback. It's a hardback.
Yeah, An Atheist in Heaven. And also Jack Kelleher had an interesting story. But I wanted to ask you about The Mask from Zimbabwe, which sounds like an old movie. But anyways, tell us about The Mask from Zimbabwe.
Well, this is another really weird and sort of scary element of the original ink obliteration. My partner who made a film with me about Timothy Leary, 1997, when I got the Santa Fe house with my wife, he gifted us a bunch of stuff to decorate the house with. He had stuff in storage. Now, his wife was from Zimbabwe, and they had a tribal mask that they had bought at Victoria Falls. They'd seen it in a dance, a tribal dance ceremony, and he bought it afterwards, took it back to the United States, put it in a plastic case. It's a very sort of creepy-looking mask, but it's common in these Zimbabwe tribal dances, and it's a work of art, so you have to respect it. And I put it on display in the living room of the Santa Fe house, right outside the door of the room where the ink obliteration happened. Well, it was the very next day, I called a lady over to come and sort of check out the house. And this is a lady, Molly, who is a self-processed psychic. She's a Native American. She said she's had these kind of communications since childhood, and normally I wouldn't have believed it or taken it seriously, but a couple months prior, she had made a prediction about my life before the very first day she met me, and I thought that prediction was so unlikely, I just dismissed it, and then it came true. It absolutely came true. So I had her come over to the house. She brought an electromagnetic field reader. This thing beeps, with an EMF field, and it lights up, gets very excited when there's a strong electromagnetic field. And so she's using it all around the house, and she's finding that there's an EMF field that's kind of moving around near the wall that separates the bedroom where the ink happened and the Zimbabwe mask. And then she points it at the mask, and the thing just goes off the charts, just beeping maximum. I've got a camera rolling, a video camera, to record this. Here's the really scary thing to me that I've never been able to figure out or resolve. She started it at my feet where there's no signal, and she slowly moved it up my body. And when she got to my head, my very brain, the EMF reader went off at full blast with blinking light and beeping. Like there was some kind of EMF field coming out of my brain, and I was just, again, shocked, scared. I'm along for the ride. There's nothing I can do about it. What does it mean? And we're filming this, and later I hear an EVP right at that moment. That means electronic voice phenomena. Mm-hmm. There were only the two of us in the house, and yet on the video, you hear another voice, and it just says one word. And it says the word Lenore. Just like that. It's like, who said it? Where did it come from? Well, Lenore, I know Edgar Allan Poe's works. Lenore always makes me think of Edgar Allan Poe. Lenore was the lost love in his poem, The Raven. He wrote another poem about Lenore. Lenore is always the beautiful woman who dies too young. And ascends to heaven, because he did believe in that. So, what is the word Lenore doing on there? Well, Fari Ackerman, who was one of the greatest promoters of the Edgar Allan Poe stories and movies, and Fari Ackerman, who was a collector of masks of all kinds, movie masks, monster masks, all kinds of things in his Acker mansion, he would have noticed this mask in my house, and this would have gotten his attention. So now there's a reference to Poe, And I called the owner of the mask, Todd Mills. There's a whole chapter about this in the book. And I told him what's happening. And he said, this is really weird. You know, it was danced at a ceremony. And I took pictures of it. It was 1983, he said, Zimbabwe. My kids, it was the first time they met their grandparents there in Africa. His wife is white from Zimbabwe. He said, I've got pictures, he said, from all around the world, slides that I keep in my carousel trays, slide projector trays. And he said, I got 100 of those boxes in storage. Nobody touches them but me. I know right where the Zimbabwe mask slides are. You've got to see them. So he goes into his storage. He finds the box marked 1983 Zimbabwe. He opens it up, and inside is the plastic round carousel tray, but the slides are gone. Huh. There are no slides there. Nothing. And they have never shown up again. They've vanished from the face of the earth. And Todd says nobody touches those slides but him. The family wouldn't dare. They're his property. They were locked in storage. How did they disappear? So this is the story of the mask from Zimbabwe. Why would those things have... it serves the purpose of really getting our attention, you see. The mask, something... the kind of thing might have been in Fari's collection if he'd had the opportunity. And now the mask slides are gone. So now this puts sort of the expression, the fear of God, puts the fear of God in my friend and producing partner, Todd Mills. Why did his slides disappear? A lot of the people who have gotten to know me, who've gotten involved in this case in one way or another, it's like I pass it on to them. You know, the weird stuff then starts happening to them, and they start notifying me. And I've got all of these emails from people who they just saw the Life After Death Project movie, and something weird happens to them. I'll mention one, like the guy who was a writer, and he and his girlfriend watched the movie, and when it was over, she intends to check her email, but she mistakenly presses navigation on her cell phone. And the navigation doesn't show where they are right then. It shows a location about 10 miles away with Ackerman Road. Ackerman. Forrest J. Ackerman. His name. The name of the road. What was that street doing showing up on her screen after she watched the movie? Wow. You know?
Wow.
It has no business being there.
Yeah. Amazing.
So added up, there's 140 incidents that have happened since 2008, all of them in An Atheist in Heaven, and I don't know, I can't predict when these things are going to happen. I can't expect them. They always take me by surprise, but there's always another thing that happens.
Before we go, I want you to let people know, where can people find out more information about you, and then where can people find out more information or how to order your book? It's Amazon.com, correct?
Yes. Amazon.com. Just type in An Atheist in Heaven, and you'll see you have a choice of getting the ebook or the hardback. And it's 500 pages. I mean, it's a major work, our contribution to science, we hope. And then the movie, The Life After Death Project. It's also, you can get it at Amazon, 2 DVD set. First one was on Sci-Fi. Or go to our website, you'll find more information there too. lifeafterdeathproject.com. Okay. Don't leave off the word project, you won't find it. But lifeafterdeathproject.com, you can order it there too. And then the main website for finding out about me, because this hasn't been my whole focus in life. I'm a painter. I've done 10 movies now. I did the original Transformers cartoons, like Bruce, you said at the beginning, and Star Wars books, and hundreds of paintings that are in different galleries, even a clothing line, fashion based on my art of flowers. So there's all those things I've done. And if you go to Paul Davids and then a hyphen, artist.com, that's the website. Maybe you can do a link or something, Bruce, when you put this up.
So pauldavids-artist.com. and also lifeafterdeathproject.com.